I'm Marcia Watson, president of Patuxent Bird Club, and I wanted to thank everybody for joining us here tonight. Our speaker tonight is Fred Shaffer, who is going to talk to us about what led him to write and publish his book, Gulls of North America, and he's going to tell us some interesting stories along the way. Many of us know Fred. He was past president of Patuxent Bird Club. He's been a local birder for a long time. And what he's probably best known for is that he used to work for Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning. And while employed in that job, he worked at the county administration building, which is strategically positioned right across the street from Schoolhouse Pond. So Fred used to walk Schoolhouse Pond every day, I guess in the morning and on an afternoon lunch break at least. And in addition to the Gulls of North America, he's compiled a checklist of birds for Schoolhouse Pond, which has been published by Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning. So we're pleased to welcome Fred to be back with us tonight to tell us about his book. So take it away, Fred.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Yeah, it's thank you so much for the invitation. It's great seeing a lot of folks again that maybe I haven't seen for a while. And like Marcia said, I'm going to kind of talk about the Gulls of Maryland, the Gulls of Schoolhouse Pond, and kind of how this passion of mine developed over the last 20 years. And I hope you find it enjoyable and worthwhile. And like Marcia said, there are a lot of kind of funny stories that happened along the way, chasing after these birds. But kind of what I wanted to focus on today was it kind of all started locally. Like Marcia said, I would walk around the pond twice a day. And for the first 10 years, I kind of avoided the gulls. But after a while, I mean, I'd see hundreds of them fly over every morning. And then sometimes there'd be hundreds or thousands of them on the pond at lunchtime or in the afternoon. And gradually I got interested in them, the diversity, the plumages, the challenge of identifying them and aging them. And gradually over time, that led to me kind of chasing after gulls in other parts of North America. And so I'm going to kind of talk about Schoolhouse Pond gulls, gulls in different parts of North America, kind of the first steps of learning to identify the gulls and age them. And also, I hope it's encouraging for folks to find a spot nearby to them, a birding hotspot where you get a lot of gulls, and just keep an eye out on them. And you never know what might turn up, because that's kind of what happened with me at Schoolhouse Pond. A lot of times I would see just red-bills or herring gulls, but days to be something really rare mixed in. It really made it worthwhile, made it an enjoyable challenge. And like I'm going to discuss tonight, my passion for gulls started at Schoolhouse Pond, a trip to Bombay Hook, and then an article that was written by Rick Blum about 20 years ago. So, like I said, initially I avoided gulls. There would be so many on the ice at the pond that I was like, well, where do you even start with that? And they could all look different, but they could all be the same species. And it was just really a challenge. And I just kind of shied away from it for a lot of years. And I think that maybe part of this talk also might be that if you're in that boat, you don't really have to be. There are ways you can learn to identify the gulls, to age them, and it can be really, really enjoyable. I mean, gulls, one advantage that they have is they're very approachable. You can get quite close to them. They're gather in large numbers, and you can really study their plumages and how they change over the course of a year, or how their plumage changes over time as they get older. Also, gulls do have a propensity to wander, and rarities do turn up, as we saw in Maryland last year with the slatyback and the Heermann's gull. So some days, like I said, gulls literally covered Schoolhouse Pond. I remember this flock. This was February 2004, and there were 964 gulls there, and all of them were ring-billed gulls. But like I said, sometimes I'd sort through them and you'd have a nice assortment, and you'd have white-winged gulls or whatever. And for me, I just really got a lot of enjoyment. My daily walks around the pond, I'd see the gulls flying over every morning, And you know, if you keep an eye on them when they're flying overhead, sometimes you can pick out a white-winged gull or a lesser blackback gull or Bonaparte's gulls, things along those lines. So it I think I heard somebody mention in the field that it really pays to bird every bird, and I think that's especially true with gulls. And there was one time I was sorting through the gulls at Schoolhouse Pond, and I was actually on my third time through the flock before heading back in, and I came across a black-headed gull. And it had probably been there the whole time, but with his head tucked and maybe he was hidden by some other birds. So it pays to check and double check. And then sometimes you might get something like an Iceland gull or a glaucous gull, which are a little harder to hide. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but December 2004 was really a remarkable month at Schoolhouse Pond. And I actually did an article for Maryland Birdlife back then on the gulls that were seen at the pond. And for whatever reason, it just ended up being a confluence of a lot of factors. There was cold weather, there was ice in the pond, there were a lot of gulls around, and there were a lot of rarities around. And there were, and basically this table summarizes what I saw that month. Obviously, most of them were ring-billed gulls, laughing gulls, herring gulls, but there were a remarkable number of lesser blackback gulls present. And then midway through the month, I saw a first-year Iceland gull standing on the ice with a bunch of herring gulls, and I was pretty excited about that. And then 2 days later, I was trudging up the stairs at work, and Jim Staz raced past me the other way with his binoculars around his neck, and he said, "There's a black-headed gull in the pond. There's a black-headed gull in the pond." So I bolted out there, and there was an adult black-headed gull just sitting on the ice that somebody else had found when they were looking for the Iceland gull. And really, those two birds were just the start of it. Subsequently, we had additional sightings of Iceland gulls, additional sightings of glaucous gulls, and probably the peak of the month was a bird I didn't see, but was found by Sherman Suter on Christmas Eve. There was a short-billed / common gull at Schoolhouse Pond, and a remarkable bird. And I believe, as far as I know, it was only a one-day wonder. A bunch of us were out on subsequent days, including December 26th, when there were a lot of birders looking at the gulls. But the remarkable thing is we didn't see the Mew gull, but we had 4 lesser blackback gulls. We had a lesser blackback herring hybrid, or a possible hybrid. And then there was an adult glaucous gull and an adult Iceland gull, which is practically unheard of for Maryland, because we get the younger birds, the immature birds, fairly regularly, but to have an adult of both at the same day, same afternoon at Schoolhouse Pond was just remarkable. And I guess the month was closed out with a Thayer's gull, or now subspecies of Iceland gull. So it was just a remarkable month. And I think it kind of highlights that if you just find a local hotspot, keep your eyes on it, you never know what's going to turn up. Now, and one nice thing, like I said about gulls and about looking at them at Schoolhouse Ponds, is you can get close to them and you can really study their plumages. And of course, in these photos, we have adult lesser blackback, herring gull, and a ring-billed gull. But that's one of the nice things about gulls, is a lot of times you can get close to them and you can really study the details, like how the bill's shaped, the color of the bare parts, the color of the eye, the head streaking, what have you. And now, like I said, I had done this over many years, and I guess I really kept a gull tally at Schoolhouse Pond for pretty close to 20 years. And this is just a table of my cumulative count of what I saw each winter. And you can see most of it's just the common stuff, but sometimes something rare would turn up. And probably anybody who's looked at gulls knows is one of the challenging things is you can be looking at a group of 20 gulls. They can all look identifiably different, and they can all be the same species. This here is a flock of ring-billed gulls. And one other thing that I've noticed is the colder, the wetter, the snowier, the windier the icier it is, the better the gull watching tends to be. And this was during an ice storm at Schoolhouse Pond, and you can see there were a ton of gulls to sort through. And one of my favorite gull sightings at the pond was a black-headed gull, right as the first part of Snowmageddon blew into our area. This was the double blizzards that hit in 2010. Well, they had let us go early at work, and so everybody else was leaving, and I went down to the pond to look at the gulls, and the blizzard was really starting to rage. And there were all these gulls in the pond, and right in the middle was a black-headed gull. And so that was really a remarkable sighting, not just for the gull, but also just for the setting, with the snow blowing madly across the ice of the pond. And I know for a lot of people who get turned off by gulls, one of the things that is challenging is learning how to age them, or sorting out all the different plumages they go through from before reaching adulthood. And I actually think that if you have the right mindset and recognize that you have to leave some birds unidentified, that it can be a lot of fun. And what I've got in this slide is the upper left's a first-year great blackback, upper right is a second-year great blackback, lower left is a third winter great blackback, and then the lower right, of course, is an adult. And you can see how the plumage changes so dramatically. The first and second year look kind of the same. The third year and adult look kind of the same. But in all cases, the structure remains the same, with that big blocky head and that powerful bill. Now, you can also learn a lot about molt in birds by studying gulls. And some of you probably remember the long-staying famous black-headed gull that was at Hunt Valley Mall. I guess it was 3 or 4 winters in a row. And the bird was right down there in the parking lot with the ring-billed gulls. Usually it was by Best Buy when I went there. And this is all pictures of the same bird. The adult winner, of course, is in the upper right or upper left. The middle picture, the middle lower picture, is the bird that's molting into breeding plumage. And then the upper right is the same bird that is in mostly breeding plumage. And the thing that I really want to point out that I thought that was interesting about this was the molting bird, the lower center picture, and then the upper right picture were just taken 5 days apart. And you can see how the whole appearance of the hood has changed just in those 5 days. And I thought that was kind of interesting as well. Now, black-headed gull was also involved kind of with my getting really interested in gulls. About 20 years ago, it was August 2002, there was a black-headed gull at Bombay Hook. And at the time, I had never seen a black-headed gull, and I was told by multiple sources this bird was nailed to the spot. So I went down there on August 8th, and I looked all day, and I never saw the bird. And then, of course, once I got back, I found the bird was still around, and it showed up the next day and subsequent days. And then I went back out there, and eventually I did see the bird. And I just spent a lot of time looking at it at my scope, looking at it with my bins, kind of just sitting on the dike at Bombay Hook. And I was just studying this bird. And I just thought that it was so beautiful. The pearly gray mantle, you know, the red bill and legs, the really attractive pattern of the wingtips, where it has the white leading edge on the upper side of the wing and then the black on the underside of the primaries. And I was just sitting there looking at that bird, and I was flipping through my Sibley guide. And of course, Sibley's got this 2-page spread where he shows all the gulls that you can see. And I was looking at the plumages of the black-headed gull. I was looking at the plumages of all the other gulls. And then I was looking at this sheet that shows all of them. And I was like, wow, it'd be really neat to see all of these species and then to see as many plumages as I can. And so subsequently, I tried to do that both in Maryland and then further afield. And it took 16 years, but eventually I saw all the species and most of the plumages. Now, around the same time, there was an article by Rick Blum in Birdwatcher's Digest called "Identifying Gulls Don't Panic." And it was just it was kind of a revelation to me, because a lot of times I would put my hands up when I'd see like a first-year gull or trying to figure out a second-year herring gull. Was it a herring gull or was it a ring-billed gull? That kind of thing. And he just wrote in a way that really made it enjoyable. And I think kind of like Roger Tory Peterson, he really boiled it down to its essence and simplified it so that you could identify the vast majority of gulls that you see. And so I think that was really a big help for me as well. Now, probably most people remember this bird as well, the St. Mary's County kelp gull. Now this bird was at, I forget the name of the town now, but it was down in St. Mary's County for 7 years, I believe. And I believe ABA at the time said it was probably the most viewed bird in North American birding history or ABA history. Because if you wanted to see a kelp gull, you had to go to St. Mary's County, Sandgates, to see the bird. And I ended up seeing it 3 different times. And in hindsight, I kind of wish I went down there a few more times. And, you know, one thing that was really a joy to me when I was putting together the gull book and researching it, of course, I looked at a lot of the scientific articles and a lot of the published references and everything. But one of the things I really enjoyed was some of the quotes from the earlier naturalists and some of the newspapers, because they really just had a way of putting things that really captured the essence of the bird. Because, you know, we look at birds, we don't really think of them as the sum of their parts, but they're a living, breathing entity, and they're beautiful to look at. And sometimes the early naturalists really captured that, and they also captured the joy of discovery and the kind of the spirit of every time you go out there, you might see something new. So I tried to incorporate that into it. And one thing I found about the kelp gull was this article from the Baltimore Sun that stated, which is with its snowy white head and breast and black and white, black wings with white spots like pearl studs, the bird looks quite elegant on the utility pole. An old school gentleman in a dress suit. Its bill, a yellow snozola worthy of W.C. Fields, undercuts the elegance a bit. So I got a lot of enjoyment for those kind of quotes. And another bird that I chased was a little bit further afield. This was up in Coney Island, New York, was the gray-hooded gull. And I had just completed my walk around Schoolhouse Pond, and I was about to enter it into eBird. And I saw the report on eBird that this gray-hooded gull's in Coney Island. And this was at the very beginning of the day. I think it was like 7:15 in the morning or something. But I saw that there was a gray-hooded gull in Coney Island, and I was packing my stuff up and I was heading for the door. And I bumped into somebody who had a meeting with me in the afternoon. And they said, "Well, you are coming to the meeting, aren't you?" And I was like, yeah, of course. Why do you ask? And I headed back to my desk glumly, probably bitterly complaining the whole way. And I stuck it out the whole day and I went to the meeting. And Jeff Cheneau and I called him and we left Crofton at 1 in the morning, got to the next night, got to Coney Island at 5:30 a.m. and the bird showed up at 7:30 a.m. And it was right there at the Coney Island Amusement Park. It was under the Wonder Wheel. It was by the volleyball courts. It was where people were doing calisthenics. And eBird said that it declared that it was the avian sensation of the summer. And it was, they had an article in the New York Times about the gull. And this really kind of summed up the period when I was up there. They stated, the New York Times stated that the hordes of birders from across the country that descended upon the beach, lugging telephoto cameras, telephoto lenses, tripods, and binoculars, made for an unusual scene, even for Coney Island. And it was true. There were people from all over North America there. And there were a couple of people there who were doing North American big ears that were there at the same time we were. But it was a real enjoyable day and a remarkable bird. I think gray-hooded gulls have still only occurred 2 times in North America. Another bird I chased was the black-tailed gull at Ashtabula, Ohio. This was the same year, 2011. And this was another early morning trip out to Ohio. And the bird was being seen at a wastewater treatment plant. And this was kind of an exercise in futility for the first 10 hours, but eventually we did see the bird. And as you can see, there was quite a crew of people there. And we're looking at the wastewater treatment plant. People are speculating where the bird is. One guy that talked nonstop, who was standing next to us, was describing where he thought the bird was, and it was next to the yellow tank. And this guy talked nonstop, and eventually Jeff and I uh, got tired of the nonstop verbal barrage and moved on. But at one point, he made the point that, well, the bird in question is by the yellow tank. I wonder what's in the yellow tank. And the guy next to him said, well, it's a wastewater treatment plant. It can only be one of two things. And so that only slowed down the verbal barrage momentarily. And eventually Jeff and I went elsewhere to look for the bird. But that guy ended up calling us back when the bird was found at a more accessible location. So in the blink of an eye, he went from a minor annoyance to a trusted birding ally. And we looked at that spot where the gull was. It was with a couple thousand gulls. And at one point, eventually it lifted up and flew in a circle around where we were standing. And everybody saw the bird in all its glory, the distinctive bill and then the distinctive black tail. Now, this is a bird that is on many birders' wish lists, and it showed up there was actually an invasion of ivory gulls in the Northeast in the winter of 2009. And it was there were a few records in the United States, and most of them were up in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and places like that. But somebody did the thing where they posted it to MD Birding at the time, and as an extra liminal, and I sent out an email right away to Bill Hubick and Mikey Ludmerding, and I said, yeah, I know it's a long way, but you want to drive up there? And I never heard back. And it turns out it was because they had left midnight the night before. And so I'm trying to wrangle other people to go up there, and I called my brother, and he was like, oh, well, no, I don't think we'll see it. It's a long ways. It'll probably be gone, blah, blah, blah. And so we didn't go. And I was mad about it for the whole week, particularly when I was seeing these point blank photos that people were posting. But eventually we got our act together. We went up the following weekend. I ended up seeing the bird in Plymouth, Massachusetts, which is pictured here. And you didn't have to find the bird. You just had to find the parking lot that was ringed with telephoto lenses, tripods, and camera lenses the size of cannons, and the bird was dead set in the middle. Now, later that same year, ivory gull also turned up at Cape May, and I went to see that bird as well. And this bird was a first-year bird, so it was kind of neat seeing the adult plumage. And then this is the first-year plumage or immature plumage, and you can see how it's got the black spots on the tail, on the primaries, and on the wing coverts. But a very, very beautiful bird. And this bird actually perched. I was on an observation deck, and it was on the mud right beneath us. And that's what this picture shows. Now, red-legged kittiwakes are a bird that you got to take a long trip for, as probably many of you already know. They're mostly seen most people see them on the Pribilof Islands in Alaska. And I consider them to be a gem of the Bering Sea. And you can see them here. There was a large group of them resting on the mud flats on St. Paul Island one day. And we got pretty close to them. And a lot of times they would mix with the black-legged kittiwake as well. And a lot of times people will just focus on the legs, the black legs versus the red legs. But the two species are a lot different in a lot more ways than that. In this picture, the red-legged kittiwake is the trailing bird in the upper right of the photo. And you can see the wings are darker both above and below. The bill's much shorter, and the head's more blocky, and it's got a much steeper forehead than the black-legged kittiwakes. So even if you can't see the legs, you can still identify it. And it's kind of the same way with lesser blackback gulls and great blackback gulls. Not that it's a real tough identification, but a lot of times people focus just on the leg colors. And sometimes if you see a great blackback gull that kind of has a diffuse leg color that's not quite pink and not quite yellow, people will call it a lesser blackback. And really there's a lot more to it than that. They're much smaller, as you can see in this picture here. The bill shape is much smaller, more parallel edged with less of a gonadal angle. There's more head streaking, significantly more. And then you can really see the difference in the mantle color in this picture. And the mantle's pale enough that it contrasts with the primary tips, whereas on great blackback gulls, they're more even and they're more similar in color. Also, lesser blackbacks have the pale eye, whereas great blackbacks have the dark eye. And probably my most treasured bird trip that I've taken was up to Point Barrow, Alaska, to witness the Ross's gull migration over the Arctic Ocean. And I think ornithologists have known, I guess, probably since the 1880s, that if Ross's gulls migrate past that point every October. And sometimes you see them in small numbers and they're far off shore. And then in other instances, the numbers can just be staggering going past the point, where you can have thousands of birds near and far going past in a day. And we saw good numbers on our trip. They weren't super close, but they were mostly just flying offshore. But we had the adults and then we had the young birds as well, which kind of had the pull tab tail, where they have a long kind of tail with the tip on the end, and they've got a black tail bar, and the very tip of the tail is black as well, so it kind of looks like a pull tab. And the photo on the right here, that was taken by Jeff Cheneau. I think he chased after one in California one time, and that's just a beautiful picture. Now, this is another one of those quotes that I really like. And if you'll bear with me, I'll just read it real quick. This is from a polar explorer. And actually, most of what we initially learned from the Arctic, of the Arctic gulls, was by Arctic explorers. And explorer Nansen had this quote about seeing the Ross's gull. A remarkable occurrence took place. We were visited by the Arctic Ross gull. Today, my longing has been satisfied. This rare, mysterious inhabitant of the unknown north, which is only occasionally seen, and of which no one knows whence it cometh and whither it goeth, which belongs exclusively to the world to which the imagination aspires, is what from the first moment I saw these tracks I'd always hoped to discover as my eyes roamed over the lonely plains of ice. And I'm sure that anybody that has been fortunate enough to see one of these birds can share in the excitement that is expressed in this quote there. And again, that's why I like some of the quotes from the early naturalists and the explorers, is they really capture an aura of discovery and a real excitement for seeing the birds. Now, no discussion of gulls would be complete without mentioning my personal favorite bird, which is the glaucous gull. A very, very big, powerful Arctic species. Former name for it was Burgomaster or Harbor Master, but I think I like Pete Dunn's moniker for it the best. He called it the Great White Gull. And obviously they're distinctive in any plumage. They're all white with the bubblegum pink bill with the black tip in first year. And then the really pale gray as an adult upper parts contrasting with the snow white wingtips. Just beautiful and distinctive in any plumage. And I can say that one of my highlights from 32 years of birding at Schoolhouse Pond was my first glaucous gull that I saw there. It was a first year bird, massive. It must have been an adult bird. And actually, when I first saw it, and before I got my bins on it, I thought it was one of the domestic ducks. It was so big and bulky, but it was a first winter glaucous gull. And another bird that hopefully will turn up more regularly in Maryland, or at least more accessibly. There was one California gull in Maryland earlier or I guess it was last year at this point, but California gulls. There's some real interesting quotes on this bird. And in fact, they're in the lore of Utah, and I guess the Mormon colonists as the saviors of the Mormon colonists in the 1800s. And California gulls are actually the state bird of Utah. And probably most people have heard the stories. Bear with me just one second. There we go. When the Mormons were first going into the Salt Lake Valley, they were planting crops and trying to survive in the wilderness. And then the crickets, or what was called the Mormon crickets at the time, descended on their colony and devoured all their crops. And this ended up really being some really remarkable quotes in the Book of Mormon, of all places, as well as some newspaper quotes. And I think what was in the Book of Mormon was, when all seemed lost and the saints were giving up in despair, the heavens were clouded with gulls, which hovered over the fields, uttering their plaintive scream. Was this a new evil come upon them? Such were the thoughts of some who expected that what the crickets left, the gulls would destroy. But not so. The gulls in countless battalions descended and began to devour the crickets, waging battle for the preservation of the crops. The people gave thanks, for this was for them a miracle. Surely the Lord was merciful and had sent the gulls as angels of mercy for their salvation. This even made news in the St. Louis Republican, which was a newspaper at the time. And they talked a lot about how when the crickets descended, the people were doing anything they could to get rid of them, as far as fire, water-filled trenches, bludgeoning them with broom handles, on, and nothing seemed to work. And then the gulls came, and the St. Louis Republican reported that hundreds of thousands of gulls made their appearance early in the spring, and as soon as the crickets appeared, the gulls made war on them and have swept them clean, so that they are scarce a cricket to be found in the valley. And in recognition of this event, the monument in Salt Lake City commemorates the miracle of the gulls, and the seagull, or the California gull, is the state bird of Utah. And I think, just to put I think naturalists understand, or ecologists understand, that there were a lot of other factors that played into the cricket's demise. They might have been playing themselves out anyway, but the California gull is definitely renowned in Utah lore. There we go. And of course, this bird is the Heermann's gull, perhaps North America's most stunning gull species. This picture, of course, was taken in Southern California, and all of the plumages of Heermann gulls are pretty striking, but I think the adult, with the white head, the red eye ring or iris or eye ring, the red bill, and then that black or dark gray slaty plumage is just so distinctive and attractive. And now Western gulls, they're particularly notable in that they seem so attached to the Pacific coast, and you rarely see them more than a few miles from the West Coast beaches and the Pacific Ocean. And what I have in this slide is upper left is a first-year Western gull. The center top picture is a second-year Western gull. Upper right is the third-year Western gull. And then, of course, the lower right is the adult Western gull. And they are beautiful birds and fixtures on our iconic West Coast beaches. Now, one of my favorite references that I referenced in my book was an article that was in the Condor in 1905. It was biologist William Finney conducted research on seabird colonies on the islands along the Oregon coast in 1905. And his research was ultimately published in the Condor in 2 parts. And he had some really great quotes of the Western Gulls. His account included a charming account of the parental attentiveness of Western Gulls in the colony. He writes, "They teach their young to keep hidden and to lie close. I have seen more than one gull impress this upon her children. One day I was walking along a ledge and came abruptly to a place where I could look down on the top slope. Below me, a few yards, I saw 2 half-grown gulls. One crouches beside a rock, but the other started to run down the ridge. He hadn't gone 2 yards before the mother dove at him with a blow that knocked him rolling. He got up dazed and struck off in a new direction, but she swooped in again and rapped him on the head till he seemed glad enough to crawl under the nearest weed." So while Finley praised them as masters of the air and said that gull flocks filled the air like so many feathered snowflakes, he was less complimentary of others of their behaviors. But what is beauty if only skin deep? A gull is not the white-winged angel that the poet sees. A gull in its own country will steal like a politician and murder like a pirate. They swarmed about us like vultures after a battle. The moment our approach drove a murre cormorant from its nest, the saintly-looking scallywags swooped down to eat the eggs and the young. The gulls are freebooters and robbers on the island, but it is only when the other birds are frightened from their nest that they have a chance to carry out their nefarious trade. So as you can see, I got a lot of enjoyment from the quotes from some of the earlier naturalists, and I incorporated them into my book. And what I've got here is a picture of the yellow-footed gull with, of course, a black-necked stilt in front. And probably most of you know, and my experience has been, if you want to see gulls, you got to go someplace really cold, windy, with snow, ice, or a chilly wind coming off the water. The yellow-footed gull's the opposite of that. You've got to go out to steamy Salton Sea to see that, or to see them, at least in continental US. And the first time I went out to see the yellow-footed gulls, I believe the temperature was 119. When I took this picture, it was a very comfortable 99. But they are an impressive bird, and the Salton Sea is just a spectacular place to birdwatch, and the yellow-footed gulls was one of the highlights of it for me. Oops. Hold on a second. I'm not. Oh, there it goes. Now, some of you probably chased the Maryland's first state record slatyback gull last year. It was found by Tim Carney, and then it was later relocated by Tom Field. And this crummy picture that I have here is the picture that I got of the slatyback gull. And others got much closer pictures than I did, but this was the picture that I got. I had been looking for it on multiple days. I hadn't seen it, and my wife and my 2 sons had just gotten a table at the I guess it was the Great American Steakhouse when the bird was relocated. And according to my sons, I was pounding the table harder than the Eagles fans who were watching their team get blown out by Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. But I ate a hasty lunch, left the bill to my wife, and I headed straight up there to Baltimore off Curtis Creek to see the slatyback gull. And when I found it, or saw it, it was snowing really hard, as you can see in the picture, and the gulls were starting to roost for the night. And I got the picture of it roosting, and then I kind of blew it up, a grainy shot in the upper left. And it was just, I said it at the time that regardless of what else showed up in Maryland in 2022, the slatyback gull had my vote for bird of the year. And for those who want to see a good picture, here is one from Vireo. And you can see the mantle is a little bit paler than the great blackback gull. It's got those raspberry red legs, the pale eye. It's got a heavy bill, but it's mostly parallel edged, and then it's got the heavy head streaking. which the adult great black-backed gulls don't have. And as time went on, I was gradually taking more and more pictures of gulls, black-headed gull on the left, a little gull on the right with the Baltimore Beltway in the background. And Schiffer Publishing up in Lancaster gave me the opportunity to pursue my dream and develop a book on gulls. And so I had a gull book. I decided I remember when I was hearing Sibley speak one time, he was saying, initially when he was doing his book, he wanted to put it in the format of other existing books. But eventually he decided he was just going to do it in the format of what he wanted in a book. And so I tried to do it in the same thing with my book. It won't necessarily please everybody or the experts, but I wanted to do gull identification in layman's terms, try to keep the technical jargon out of it to the extent that I could. I wanted clearly understandable, accessible language. And I kind of wanted to explain the big picture of identifying gulls, not necessarily get lost in all the feather by feather minutia. And it's kind of the approach that Rick Blum had in his article, where you focus on the big picture. Sometimes you do need to get into the nitty-gritty details, but for the most part, you can look at the big picture, look at the identifiable field marks, and put an age and a name on most of the gulls that you see. And I wanted to try to make the comparisons easy and gull study fun. Now, one other thing that I included was an appendix, and I have an appendix on my gull observations from Schoolhouse Pond. I have an appendix on a section on the ivory gull invasion of 2009, where I tracked down every single gull that showed up south of their normal range and documented it. And then I also documented the Franklin gull fallout in November 2015, which is another remarkable event that touched Maryland with a lot of Franklin gulls at Ocean City Inlet, among other places. And I tried to include an annotated bibliography of sources so that if you want more information, you've got some good references to go to. And I wanted to show the gulls as you see them in the field at rest and in flight. This picture, of course, shows the immature Sabin's gull on the left, an adult lesser black-backed gull in the center, and an immature little gull on the right. And it didn't escape my publisher's attention that when I was working on this over a number of years, that like 3 other gull books came out. And so they were kind of thinking, well, how can we make this one different? And in addition to some of the things we mentioned, they also wanted to do fold out comparison sheets. And so basically what I'm showing here is the adult white-headed gulls plus the Hierman's gull. And this folds out from the center of the book. And then immediately opposite of it, you have the same species of the first-year gull. So, and I know that one of the things I always liked about Chandler Robbins' Golden Guide and the Sibley book is that they've got these comparison sheets where if you're unsure, you can look at this fold-out sheet of all the species and help to narrow it down. And so we tried to do the same thing for my gull book. And we've also got the hooded gulls, both in winter plumage and breeding plumage. And this is just a shot of lesser back-backed black gull plates where you've got the photos and then you've got captions with the location, date, and then clearly written sub-captions of what you're looking at. And you'll see a lot of Maryland pictures in there. Naylor Mill Road, Ocean City Inlet, Back River, Schoolhouse Pond, Sandy Point, among others. And something else I tried to do, and hopefully this worked. I know the pictures ended up kind of small, but I did gull aging tips for the small hooded gulls, for the medium-sized hooded gulls, for the medium-sized white-headed gulls, and then the large white-headed gulls. And basically, I've got the ages, I've got a few tips for what you look for each age, and then I've got a photo of each plumage on the accompanying page. So you can kind of see it all at a glance. And when I got the package from the publisher, I was expecting just a box of books, but they sent me one advanced copy of the book and a bottle of wine from one of the local wineries up in Lancaster. And I just want to take this slide to point out that I wouldn't have gotten this point without the help of countless birders. And first and foremost among them is Gene Scarpula, because he helped me reviewing some of the initial text. He reviewed the photos, he reviewed the captions. And I think one of the hardest things of putting the book together was just getting people to look at stuff, because obviously people are busy, they've got other priorities. But in addition to Gene, Frank Marenghi, Bill Hubick, Sean McCandless, Jeff Cheneau, Phil Davis, and I'm probably forgetting some folks. They all contributed photos, they reviewed things, and I'm just very, very grateful for the help that they all provided. And it wouldn't have happened without them. And I'm going to close with, of course, since the book went to publication, I got some of my best gull pictures. This was on the Back River last April. Right next to my kayak, I had a first winter little gull and an adult little gull. And this is another picture of the adult little gull, point blank range. Lesser black-backed gulls occurred in remarkable numbers this past fall, where I'd see 30 plus at Sandy Point and Chesapeake Beach. And of course, Baltimore's Hiraban's gull. I took this picture when it first showed up, and I've been trying to go periodically to see how the plumage changes. But just a remarkable bird, and we're lucky that that bird's still hanging around. As far as I know, he's still up there in the Inner Harbor. And with that, I think that wraps it up for me. I want to thank you very much again for the opportunity to share this with you, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you, Fred, for that very enjoyable talk. We enjoyed your beautiful photos and your humorous comments about the joys of chasing gulls around the world. Well, at least around the continent.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn off the recording if I can find the right button. I have to get rid of this. And